FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and well, it's been quite a week. We got a lot more ahead. The quarantine at some point in the not too distant future is going to be ending, and you need to start thinking about what your life is going to be like afterwards. I told you from the get-go this thing was going to end somewhere between April 15th and May 15th. That was from Gerard Lamero, PhD in math. He said there was an 80% chance. Have you seen the protests taking place in places like Michigan, even in Florida? It doesn't matter the affiliation, the party affiliation of the governor. Everyone is fed up with it. And as people see less and less utility of being locked down and not being able to go out and even buy a cup of coffee, there's going to be less and less adherence to it. We're seeing it in LA. They're going to storm the beaches, and rightfully so. The government, as usual, well, is doing what the government does best, and you know what that is. So what do you do? What is in your future? What is in my future? And how do we make the most of it and keep our families together, keep our finances together, keep your life together? And well, one person I've followed for over a decade now, or at least a decade, is my good friend Jason Hartman. And I back tested his real estate system years ago to see how it performed. Of all the people that have come on my show, and there have been several thousand financial experts, he is one of 5 people who actually had a system that worked in the Great Recession, and even before that and after. It performed stellarly. And really, let's find out what Jason is thinking now. Jason, it's great to have you back on the show.
Thanks, Kerry. It's always great to talk to you, and you know, you just have really very interesting insights into what's really going on. You know, in times like this, really in all times, but especially times like this, we have got to learn to read between the lines, and there is so much misinformation out there. I know that both you and I are probably experiencing something completely opposite of what many people are experiencing now, because you know, many people, friends of mine and so forth, are kind of like, oh, well, you know, you're at home, you have all this extra time, but you and I are in the media business, and we have just been bombarded. I mean, I don't know about you, I think it's true with you too, but I've just been busier than ever. My podcast is now running 7 days a week instead of the normal 5 days a week, because there's just too much information to wade through, and it can be very, very confusing. So I hope that we'll clear some of that up today and give your listeners some ideas that they can use, and then invite them to an upcoming webinar we've got with just specifically for your audience that will really, really help them and go into more depth on many of these concepts we'll discuss today. So excited to be here.
And we're really thrilled to have you here. You know, we're seeing, and just before we get started, unprecedented government control, and really there are no free markets left because all the markets are shut down. The only theoretically free markets are the securities markets, and they haven't been free for over a decade. And that presents you with a lot of questions, because without free markets, as we know, one of the primary requirements or benefits of a market, it's a place where people go to buy and sell goods and services. It doesn't have to be a physical locale. It can be, you know, in cyberspace, which is where most of them are now. But we don't really have price discovery, which is one of the major functions of a market.
I'm so glad you said that, because that is the primary function of any market. It is price discovery. And when you have the powers that be, central banks, governments, of course, they've always distorted the market and manipulated the market, but now more than ever, because they're literally buying bonds, and soon they're going to be buying stock. This is absolutely insane that it's literally illegal for the Federal Reserve to do that, but they're essentially breaking the law. Their end run around it is to simply set up what Enron used very I hate to say, but profoundly, is the SPV, the special purpose vehicle. You've probably talked about this with other guests on your show, I'm sure. But they basically set up another entity to go in and literally become an investor in the market, so that they can drive up the price, drive up or down the price of any stock or bond. So it's another way for the powers that be to pick the winners and losers. It's completely unfair. It's absolutely ridiculous. So this is a scary time, but in every time like that, for those with courage and the willingness to see through the smoke and mirrors, there are unprecedented opportunities. And that's what we hope to explore today, but also on our upcoming webinar with you. And I'm just very excited to dive into that. So let me dive into this just a little bit and give your listeners kind of a taste of some of the stuff we're working on, which I think is game changing. And I've given this presentation that I'll give on the webinar to several groups, and it has been received with just rave reviews, people saying that they didn't think of it that way. They never saw this opportunity before. And I've given this presentation to some pretty high level groups, high net worth people who are in the know, who have been investing for many, many years, decades, and they've really liked it. So the first thing I want to start off by saying is, look, the economic game is always a game of relativity, of compared to what. And even if we don't teach you anything on the Financial Survival Network or on my podcast that makes you fabulously wealthy, at the very least, let's help you not lose as everybody else is losing. So here's the quote for the day. In a recession or in a depression, the person who wins is the person who loses the least. Yeah. Okay, the person who wins is the person who loses the least.
Yep, that's totally true. And I used to have a guest on by the name of Ned Schmidt. He was a well-known gold and agri-commodity analyst. And that's exactly what he said.
Yeah.
And there was a guy, Howard Katz, also no longer with us. He had a website called The One-Armed Economist, which was a reference to something FDR said. And that's exactly what he said is, if you manage to stay where you are right when times are bad, you're actually winning.
Right. Because if you're treading water, okay, and not sinking, and everybody else around you is sinking, then the marketplace adjusts so that there's deflation in prices, and suddenly you have more money to spend than everybody else does. And so your lifestyle has literally improved. Now, this isn't the positive way to improve your lifestyle. We want to see the pie get bigger and the rising tide float all ships. Maybe that's not the environment we're in. But either way, we want the ship of everybody listening to rise. We want you to succeed. So hopefully you're going to actually gain during these times. But at the very worst, let's make sure you don't lose. The Chinese have a symbol for crisis, and it's the same as the symbol for opportunity. And literally translated, Carrie, it means crisis is an opportunity riding the dangerous wind. Crisis is an opportunity riding the dangerous wind. So it's the yin and yang of things, right? The flip side of the crisis is opportunity. And you and I both have interviewed thousands of people in the know on our podcasts over the years, thousands of thought leaders, economists, investors, people who have deep insight into things. And our job is to assimilate that and kind of understand it in a new way and put it all together and share it with our listeners. So after so many decades in this business and being through many, many cycles in the real estate investing world, I've put together some things that I think will really help. And we've heard all the pundits out there saying, when we do have a recovery, when we recover from this absolutely disastrous first time ever self-imposed recession or maybe depression. It's the only time there's ever been a self-imposed economic disaster. That's what we're in now, right? What kind of recovery will it be? Everybody's hoping it'll be a V-shaped recovery, meaning we've obviously gone down very quickly, but maybe we'll come up very quickly. The other thought is maybe it'll be a U-shaped recovery. In other words, on that chart with the metaphorical U, we stay at the bottom for a while, then we gradually come back up. Or will it be an L-shaped recovery, right? I don't think it will be any of these. I think it will be what I call a modified square root recovery, okay? And if you think of a square root sign, and I'll actually show all of these things visually on the webinar, so they're more tangible for everybody now listening. I think there will be a modified version of the square root sign, and I think that's how we are going to see things as we come out of this. So initially, there's going to be a pent-up demand that will actually make things seem good for a while, and then we'll get to the new normal, which will be a different world. It will be a movement back toward a simpler life. It will be a smaller economy, at least initially, for probably several years, and there will be opposing forces that can really enrich a lot of people listening. Now, I'm not going to go into the economics in depth. I do that on my show. You do that on your show all the time. What I'd like to focus on today, because time is limited, is 6 major trends that are less about economics, but more about housing specifically, and more about new migration patterns that will emerge out of this crisis and after the shelter in place, quarantine, lockdowns, shutdowns, whatever we want to call them, will emerge very quickly after that. And investors can take, if they act quickly, they can position themselves to take advantage of these trends. So again, not going into deep economic stuff, which you and I both love talking about, Kerry, and we've spent many, many hours over the years of knowing each other talking about fiscal policy, monetary policy, all of that stuff. I'm kind of not going to go into that too much on the webinar or today. I want to focus more on migration trends because I think that's simpler to understand, and I think it really is very obvious. So, number one, in this shadow demand for real estate. Now, I'm talking about real estate here, and the changes, the profound changes coming at real estate will be couples, okay? Married couples or cohabitating romantic couples, okay? And what will they be doing? This is about 50% of the households, okay, maybe 60% of the households. How will they be acting after the shutdowns are lifted, right? How will they be acting? Is there going to be a baby boom in 9 months? Is there going to be a spike in divorce rates as there's been in Wuhan, China? What does that mean for housing? The next major demographic I'm going to focus on, and again, this all comes with a lot of visual aids. There's a lot of charts on all of this stuff, is roommates, okay? There are a lot of non-romantic platonic people, in fact, about 32% of households living together, because there's been a housing shortage for a couple of decades now, and housing has become obviously very expensive. And these roommates are going to be acting differently as we come out of this crisis. They're going to do certain things that will create a massive amount of new housing demand coming out of this crisis. And don't let me do all the talking. Maybe you have a comment, so feel free to barge in anytime, Kerry.
Yeah, well, I think, here where we both live pretty close together.
Yes.
The idea of neighborhood centricity, for lack of a better term, is something that I've seen take off, where people a month or two ago, you'd pass them walking down, you kind of nod. But now there's much more connection with the people who live in close proximity to you, much more than there was just a couple of months ago. So the idea of neighborhoods is going to be extremely important. The other thing is the virtual neighborhood also has become more important as well, because, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, all of Zoom, all of this FaceTime on Apple, all this teleconferencing has totally mushroomed, skyrocketed.
Oh, yeah, absolutely has. And we saw the day that the financial markets really took the big hit about, 5 weeks ago now. Yeah. And it seems like the market finally paid attention to the coronavirus pandemic scare. The Zoom stock zoomed. Yeah. Pardon the pun. And it's way overvalued. So that's not a stock tip at all, but it is a change, no question about it. The other big shift that is going to be hugely significant, we've heard about the 1%, we've heard about the 99%, right? And that really came to the fore back in the Occupy Wall Street days. Well, I'm going to talk about the 84%. And the 84% is the population of the U.S. living in urban areas. This is a giant megatrend that is going to have a monumental impact on real estate prices, on housing, on supply and demand. And by the way, we are seeing a very rare thing happen in the economy that really hasn't happened since the 70s. And that is that phenomenon, and you know what I'm going to say, is called supply-demand shock. This is a rare malady. It hasn't happened for decades, and it portends a new economic malady for investors and for just people and their lifestyle and their standard of living that is giant. But think about this: the average population density of the United States is 87 people per square mile. Okay? Think about that for a moment. That's not many people. That's very low density, right? The average population density of metropolitan areas in the United States is 283 people per square mile. Now, the average population density of one of the hardest hit hotspots, or maybe the hardest hit hotspot in the United States, of course, New York City, is 27,012 people per square mile. So just let that settle in your head. And on the webinar, we will unpack that quite a bit more in terms of this new mass migration trend, this tidal wave, this tsunami of people that is going to change the game of real estate in a hugely significant way. There are about 128 million households in the United States, and some back-of-the-napkin math shows that we've got 268 million people living in urban areas, that's 84%, that cannot socially distance very easily in some of those areas. And those people, I believe, will have essentially a post-traumatic stress disorder that they're already experiencing now. But when these quarantines are lifted, they are going to make life decisions in terms of where they live and how they live that will be hugely impactful, and an opportunity for investors to get out in front of that tidal wave and if you will, to use that metaphor, to catch that wave and surf it and ride it to additional prosperity, or at least not losing, right? Like so many other people will be in this economic storm. Hugely, hugely significant. The corporate raider we've all heard of, Carl Icahn, is doing a major short of the commercial real estate market. And commercial real estate is going to be impacted in devastating ways. It already has been, but that'll continue. Now, we've seen the retail apocalypse for the past 10 years, 15 years or so with online shopping. But now we are going to see the office space apocalypse and an additional retail apocalypse for the type of retail that people use in terms of gyms, health clubs, restaurants, movie theaters. A huge, very sad, very devastating impact. And now we are seeing the home as the center of the universe. So there are some big trends. This is a big deal, Carrie. This is a big, big deal. Many people have, kind of wanted to say, well, we're going to have a V-shaped recovery. It'll come back. It's just another recession. I don't think so. I think this is a game changer. And by the way, I didn't name those other trends as I kind of talked about them just now. But one is the urban dwellers, the 84%. Another is the home workers, the remote workers. Another is remote working out, which is not insignificant, by the way. And another trend, and the last one, is multi-generational living, something that is not common in the U.S., but is common in Europe, Asia, the Middle East, especially in Asia. And I think that trend is going to have a giant impact as well on investors and on real estate investors specifically, both positive and negative if they're not in the know, if they're not positioning their assets correctly. There are 28 million people in the United States who are age 70 or older, and that's according to the 2010 census. Wait till we get to the results of the 2020 census that we don't have yet, and you're going to see that number has increased dramatically. And these people, with all of the nursing home deaths and all of the new paranoia for people in close proximity that can't socially distance, this one trend alone is going to have a giant impact on real estate and on investment in general. So I hope people will attend the webinar. And Carrie, do you have a link for that yet?
Yeah, the link is in the show notes to this interview with Jason. Just click it, sign up, and attend. I promise you it's going to be interesting, enlightening, and it's going to be profitable. Because look, the one thing I know about Jason, one thing about myself, contrarians by nature. But more important than that, because you don't want to just be a contrarian for the sake of being a contrarian, it's called getting out ahead of the trend. That's something that Jason has always been quite masterful at. And I believe, Jason, that it's going to be more important than ever. Like you say, the retail apocalypse, the office space apocalypse, all of a sudden these companies are going to find out that, we don't really need these offices. We're functioning fairly well, especially the online businesses. Yes, brick and mortar probably do, but even law firms will learn that they really don't need a fraction of the office space they have. And then there's also the impact upon education. We didn't even talk about that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and that's a good one, by the way. That's very positive, but it has huge impact for housing as well. But Carrie, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because people, thankfully, are learning that the emperor has no clothes. These these colleges have been ripping people off for decades. It's totally overpriced. And now, and you've seen this, of course, they told all the students, go home and take your courses online. And many of them are so greedy that they won't rebate or give any tuition concessions, and the students can't live in the campus housing anymore, but they're not rebating their rent.
That's typical.
It's unbelievable.
It's a ripoff.
It's a total ripoff. Yeah.
And so education is going to be totally revamped, not instantaneously, but you can kiss teachers' unions goodbye. It was what they've been fighting their entire existence for the past 10 years when the homeschool movement really took off. But now the homeschool movement has merged with the online learning movement. I mean, this isn't anything new, but this is rocket fuel. That's a trend that's on steroids, and they're going to get their comeuppance. One thing we didn't talk about, Jason, is the total collapse of the states and the pension funds.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's defined benefit.
There are like 50 things we didn't talk about.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think these are important. These are really important because, to you and I, they're so apparent, but many of you out there haven't thought about it yet. And that's one that you really, it's really important because it affects us all. We could go on all day, but obviously you want to come to the webinar. You want to go see us live, interact. There'll be a Q&A session at the end, and we'll spend as much time as we possibly can taking your questions and hopefully providing you with actionable answers and intelligence. It's not always easy to do that, but we will do our best. And I really feel, Jason, that in 08 and 09, I was really well off financially, and not much changed for me at that time, but my mindset became fear-based. I was really scared about the future.
There was a lot of reason to feel that way. I was scared. Everybody was. It was, before this, nobody had a reference point that was anywhere near young or middle-aged, because the last time we had a major economic event like that was in the 30s.
Exactly. Okay,
we nobody had a reference point for the Great Recession. 2008, 2009-ish. So you were fear-based like so many. So tell us more about that.
Well, so, I just was worried the whole thing was going to collapse. The dollar, everything else was just going to go down the tubes. And as a result, I was paralyzed by fear. And what I realized now that I didn't realize then, and it took a couple of people I know who got super, super wealthy from that time period, is that like, to start it off, the way you started off, the Chinese symbol for crisis, danger, and opportunity. Right. And I would also add that the Hebrew symbol for luck is mazel, and it actually consists of 3 characters: time, opportunity, and place. And therefore, my mindset's totally different here. I'm totally excited. I'm looking forward to every day. I have no fear about it. And I'm looking for opportunities, not just to help myself, but to help others as well. And that's the way you have to treat what's going on now. It is a massive opportunity. We don't get many of these in our lifetimes. The fact that we've gotten 2 in the past 12 years is amazing. Right. And it's all about mindset. It's all about state of mind. And if you stay on top of yours, you will recognize the opportunities as they present themselves to you, which they invariably will.
That's a very good point. And, I'll just tell you my reference point. During the Great Recession, of course, lots of people were scared. But, interestingly, some of my own clients were maybe less concerned than I was. And they were buying up properties through our network like crazy. And look at them now. I mean, look at them even just 6-7 years later after that. Now we're 10 years depending on how you count the Great Recession. Most people say the fall of Lehman was the start, but I think it really was before that when the mortgage companies started collapsing.
Yeah.
So we're 10, 12 years later now, but they only had to wait really about 4 to 6 years to see that they made brilliant decisions. One of our clients that was buying a bunch of properties from us back then was a guy named David Porter. He just did a little video testimonial for us, and he purchased a whole bunch of properties from us in Indianapolis, and I mean, he just scored. You can't even come close to getting such good quality properties like that for that price today. So yes, there are always huge opportunities when everybody else is scared and worried. And if you combine it with these very sensible demographic migration trends that we're going to talk about on the webinar, I just don't see how anybody could lose. I mean, the mortgages are so incredibly cheap right now. They are literally paying you to borrow the money. Negative interest rates. I mean, it's beyond the beyond.
Yeah,
it's
really
an incredible opportunity. It really is.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing. So, hey, just click that link, register for the webcast. It's going to be really amazing. And Jason, we'll talk to you again soon. Hey, any questions, comments, why don't you email us, kl@kerrylutz.com, kl@kerrylutz.com, and visit Jason's site. What's your site, Jason, you want to direct people to? JasonHartman.com is our main site, and we're going to give out another site during the webinar, a specialized site just for the attendees with some great free resources there as well. But JasonHartman.com is the main site, and we'll look forward to seeing you all on the webinar. And until then, stay well, happy investing. We'll see you on the webinar.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to FinancialSurvivalNetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.